Gun Owners Radio. We make activism easy. Thank you so much for joining us every Sunday from 5 to 7. And then check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/gunownersradio. We have a jam-packed episode for you. California CCW news. We have big California Magazine news. And then what happened in the special election? There was a special election for county board down in South Bay. What happened? We're going to talk about that. And then Carl Deio, Assemblyman Carl Deio, has a huge announcement. He's going to spend some time talking with us, so stay tuned. That and a whole lot more. Thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio.
All right, huge shout out to Discount Gun Mart here on Marina Boulevard for providing us a studio for us to broadcast to you here in. Go ahead and go to discountgunmart.com, check them out, look for guns, ammo, range time, and training. They've got it all, and they'll take care of you.
Don't forget to go to our website, gunownersradio.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow and like us on Facebook and Instagram. Sign up for our emails and tell your friends. gunownersradio.com. Don't keep us a secret.
There you go, my good friends Alicia and Dakota. Thank you guys for being on the show today. I think we have a fun show.
That's it.
Yeah.
And now,
what's it time for?
It's time for
the Gun Truth of the Week. Okay, Gun Truth of the Week. In recognition of Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month, and in recognition of our women's program, Not Me, their 6th anniversary, the common misconception is that women are against gun ownership. But a 2014 Gallup survey found that 58% of women believe that having a gun in the house makes it safer. According to a recent Pew survey, over 28% of women have at least one gun in the house, and 41% of women say they have, quote, convenient access to guns. And that is your gun truth of the week. I'm not sure what convenient access to guns means. I think that might. What do you guys think that means? Do you think it's like a spouse has it or something? Or?
Yeah, I think the 28% maybe is speaking to. Well, actually, no, I'm rereading it. My assumption was wrong.
28% of women have at least one gun in the house, and 41% of women say they have convenient access.
Well, if it's not in the house, I don't know that it's convenient.
Yeah, I think they more mean like they have convenient access to go to the range. So like maybe they've got a dad or a brother that has a gun that will take them shooting whenever they want. I don't think they mean like for defensive purposes. I just think they mean like, oh yeah, I've got somebody that would be happy to take me shooting.
That's probably right. But the important thing, and of course I'm talking to Alicia and Dakota, and I think the important thing is you guys know firsthand, women love guns.
Yeah. And a lot of women love guns.
When they give it a chance. Yeah, they do.
And I think from my limited experience, but especially from setting up Not Me, when I started setting up Not Me, and I would talk to, there was kind of this idea of, well, here, let's give women another hobby. I was like, I don't think women need more to do. I think they got a lot on their plate. Let's talk about the fact that they can protect themselves. And that seemed to really resonate. Where I think guys tend to look at it as, hey, this is a cool hobby. And oh, by the way, I can defend myself. But women, I think it's the opposite. I think they're like, wow, this empowers me and I can defend myself. And it turns into a cool hobby for a lot of, I don't know, am I off?
Yeah.
Am I painting with too wide a brush?
I think it's a mix. So like for our intro event at A Girl and a Gun, we ask the ladies who show up, like how many of you have a gun in the home? How many of you have never shot before? So we kind of get a good understanding of like why they're there. And I would say the majority of people, women who are coming to us for the first time, they either have a gun in the home, but they're not comfortable using it. And so they want to get comfortable just because it's there. Their husband has a gun there. And then another big portion is that they have this fear of shooting, or they've seen or experienced some sort of, violence related to firearms, or they know somebody who lost their life either, via murder or suicide. And so they have this fear of firearms, and they want to kind of expand their horizons and get brave and try the thing that scares them. So we have a lot of women come to us because they just want to kind of beat the fear, and then they start loving it.
Beat the fear. I like that. Beat the fear.
Yeah, they want to push themselves to overcome this thing that feels so scary to them. And then once they overcome it and they have a good experience, they're like, "Oh, maybe I want a gun in my house," But a lot of times that's not why they're coming to us. They're not planning on making a purchase. They just want to prove to themselves that they can shoot and that it's not going to hurt them.
They want to beat the fear. And this is from 2014. I would guess that it's probably ticked a little higher since 2014.
I would say definitely so.
We saw a huge increase during COVID, right?
Yeah,
there was all those statistics about COVID female gun ownership.
But still,
not even COVID. After our local riots here in La Mesa,
oh, yeah.
I saw a huge influx of women coming to me for private instruction.
Yeah, but I mean, six in 10 women saying, "Yeah, it's better to have a gun." Mm-hmm. That's what really kind of cuts. All the political rhetoric of guns and him and ha and the myths or whatever. The fact that people instinctively, logically know that if they're in some kind of situation where they're being violently attacked, they know they want a gun. They don't want a whistle. They don't even want pepper spray. They know, hey, you know what? When everything goes, wrong and I'm in true trouble, it's a gun. That's what I want. That cuts through all the political rhetoric, all the propaganda. People know guns are effective with self-defense.
And even if they don't want to be the one to use the gun for self-defense, they want someone else with a gun to show up real quick,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So I think it kind of all goes back to this concept that a lot of us want the same thing. Whether you're pro-gun or anti-gun, we want to feel safe. We want our communities to be safe. We don't want kids to be finding firearms and using them to accidentally, shoot themselves or their friends. So we all want safe, responsible gun ownership, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. It's just getting through to that emotional side of the anti-gunners and explaining how many lives guns save. Like, the anti-gunners do a great job of showing us the tragedies of, kids finding guns or whatnot. And yes, that's a huge tragedy, but we don't do a good job of showing, our side doesn't do a good job of showing all the lives that have been saved with defensive gun use and showing their faces and saying their names. Like, we just don't talk about that enough, but I think we should.
I agree. We can talk about it more. In fact, we're going to do a curtain call later in the show just for that reason. Okay, Q&As. You have Qs? I have As. Every week we get a bunch of questions. We get some questions. So what I try to do is answer them on the air here so that people, I don't have to answer the same question 150 times. And I know that if somebody has the question, a lot of people have the question. This one came up a lot this week. Was the stabbing in Texas legal? Is generally what they're asking. There was a stabbing at a high school, 2 students. And here's what I'm going to say about that. There's not enough information, and the information is not reliable enough for us to really, truly talk about this thing yet. I think it's, and I want to talk about it in this situation, in every situation. When this kind of stuff comes up, never believe the first report. We just don't have enough information. We have no idea what's going to come out from the investigation. We have no idea what's already happened in the investigation. We just have a couple of facts. So I don't like to comment on this stuff. We can say it's sad and tragic because it was, and that's obvious. But as far as judging who did the right thing or whatever, we just don't have enough information yet. So, I'm not going to. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to comment on that. But we're generally not going to talk about and comment on any situation when it's this quick. There are guys like John Correa who have a 3-day rule where they say, hey, don't say anything for 3 days. But it's been 3 days. We don't have enough information even after that. So we don't want to speculate. We certainly don't want to say the wrong thing. So that's where I'm going to leave that. Next question. Can a person with a visa get a California CCW? No, you must have a MasterCard. That's hilarious. Okay, so they're asking if somebody is here in the United States on a visa, can they obtain a California CCW? Short answer is no. It's actually on the Q&As on the San Diego Sheriff's website, but it's on a lot of sheriff's websites. You must be a permanent legal resident alien or a U.S. citizen to apply for a CCW. Visa status is not acceptable for applying for a concealed weapon license. Now, that's not a policy of the sheriff. That's basically the state. But people want to know where's that come from? And where it comes from is Penal Code 26-150, 150, and then number 3 there. Actually, it's 150, 26-150A, and then 3. When a person applies for a new license or a license renewal to carry a pistol, revolver, or other firearm capable of being concealed upon the person, the sheriff of a county shall issue or renew a license to that person upon proof of the following. And that's where the 3 comes in. There are a couple different things they have to get. Number 3, the applicant is a resident of the county or a city within the county, or the applicant's principal place of employment or business is in the county or a city within the county, and the applicant spends a substantial period of time in that place or employment or business. Prima facie evidence of residency within the county or a city within the county includes, but is not limited to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't actually say, and you're probably going to tell me, hey, Mike, it doesn't say anything about visas. So what are you talking about? Well, if you're here on a visa, you're not a permanent resident. You're basically somebody that's visiting. Now, you might be visiting for a long time, but you're still a visitor. So that's where that comes from. If you're on a visa, if you're here on a visa, you're basically, here for what's considered a short time. This isn't your residence. It isn't a strong enough. You do reside here for the time you're on the visa, but you're not tied to San Diego or any place in California enough, which is why someone with just a visa cannot get a CCW. I don't know if I agree or disagree with it. This is the way it is, unfortunately, for folks that are on a visa. So there you go. All right, let's do our legal update.
All right, this segment is our legal and legislative segment where we tell you what you need to know from the courts and from the legislators. Remember, we're not lawyers, and nothing that we say is to be taken as legal advice. Our sponsor, John Dillon, is a lawyer, and he has been helping people to fight those gun violence restraining orders and more. If you know somebody that's had their self-defense rights taken away without due process, give John a call. His website is dillonlawgp.com, and his phone number is 760-642-7150.
On the subject of normal capacity magazines becoming legal or illegal, I may have spoken too soon. When I talked about the Duncan case and the ruling against us by the Ninth Circuit Court, I said it would take a miracle for us to continue to have magazines that hold more than 10 rounds, even the Freedom Week magazines. I was wrong. So let's talk about why. Or I was right and a miracle happened, but really it was just some paperwork. I'm not sure it was a miracle. So here's what happened. The Duncan lawsuit, which is suing to get rid of the magazine ban. So California has a ban on magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. It was a ban on purchase, selling, importing, taking possession of, but it wasn't a possession ban. But then state of California, in their infinite wisdom, also instituted a possession ban. It didn't matter when you got them. That was 2019, and we got Freedom Week. Judge Benitez, St. Benitez, this is where we discovered him. He said, hey, you know what? This thing's unconstitutional. Go to town. Get your magazines. And there were like over 1 million magazines sold in that 1 week. Mm-hmm. Well, then the Ninth Circuit Court put pressure on him and said, hey, you need to stay this decision, your injunction specifically. And what that means is that he got to put it on hold. Well, the state of California appeals it. So he said, okay, fine. The decision is on hold, okay, but the injunction stays in place. So if you purchased magazines during that week, or if you just owned magazines legally that week and they held more than 10 rounds, then they're completely, totally legal for you to use, carry, go to the range with, whatever. So that's been working its way up and down the courts. And most recently, it's about 3 weeks now. 3 weeks ago, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, that's a panel of 11 judges, said, you know what? This thing does comply with the Second Amendment. You can ban magazines. Now, they're woefully wrong, and we don't agree with them in any way. It was a pretty ridiculous decision. But it definitely put us in danger, because once that decision happens, the injunction goes away. Well, the process is you basically have 3 weeks until the order goes back down to the judge, the original judge, which would be Benitez. And Benitez has to follow what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals says. Well, right in the nick of time, just a couple of days prior before that 3-week deadline, attorney Paul Clement, who you may know from a lot of big federal Second Amendment cases, wrote a request saying, hey, we're going to take this to the Supreme Court. We think the injunction on the enforcing this law so that mags are illegal, we think that injunction should stay in place. Basically, we think that as long as you had those magazines during Freedom Week, that you should be exempt from enforcement of this law, meaning they're legal. You can carry them, you can go to the range with them, you can possess them, everything's good to go for now. Interestingly enough, it went unopposed. The state of California did not oppose it. They didn't fight back. So the Ninth Circuit Court said, okay, fine. You have 90 days. And within that 90 days, if we hear from the Supreme Court's clerk that, yes, you're trying to appeal this to the Supreme Court, you're good to go. But if they don't tell us within 90 days, then boom, mags are illegal again. Well, they're definitely going to appeal this thing. It's going to go to the Supreme Court, or at least they're going to ask the Supreme Court to review it. So that'll happen. Now, how long does that take? Well, once they do that, then the other side has to respond, and then they have to choose when they're going to hear it. This could take months, maybe even years. So for the foreseeable short-term, mid-term future, if you have magazines that you obtained and or possessed during Freedom Week that hold more than 10 rounds, you're good to go. The law is not being enforced. You can carry them. You can take them to the range. You can possess them. You can have them in your home. You cannot buy them. You cannot sell them. You cannot import them. You cannot take possession of them. But if you already had them during Freedom Week, you're good to go. Now, we actually created this cool, handy, dandy little graphic. If you look on, we're going to have this up on our website, and we have it up on our social media, Instagram and Facebook. And we dated it down at the bottom to make sure that it reflects, hey, this was as of this ruling. So this tells you what you can and can't do. You can own normal capacity magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. You can carry normal capacity magazines. You can use normal capacity magazines like at the range. But what you can't do, big red thumbs down. You can't buy them, you can't sell them, you can't import them, and you can't take ownership. Like if someone gifts them to you, you can't do that. Now, what does it mean to import? We get that question a lot. The reality is, the attorneys I've spoken with are split on what it means to import. Some of them say that bringing any magazine in from out of state is considered importing. Some say, well, it's really only importing if you're intending to bring them into state to transact business, some kind of commerce, like you're bringing them into the state to sell them. The safest answer, obviously, is don't bring them into the state of California. But this has never been tested in court. I'm certainly not an attorney. I can't tell you whether this is or isn't legal. Every cop, district attorney, judge in California is going to think independently and different on this. And I'm guessing in the state of California, it's not going to go your way. So why be the test case? If you're the test case on this, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars on a potential felony, which is all 50 states and follows you basically for life. It's really, really horrible. So that's what's going on with magazines. I think it's excellent news. I'm so happy about it. I think it's great. I got to tell you, I have a box sitting next to my desk with a 60-round drum and some 15-round Glock mags that were going to go to my nephew in Virginia, and he just lost out. So we get to keep them. There's no need to get nervous or scared. This is legit. This is real. And check our email for more information on that. What do you guys think about that?
It's amazing. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good news. On the one hand, I hate that we have to be so thankful for scraps.
Right.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like that stinks. But what I do like is the fact that, hey, this is working. There's a bunch of different arms of fighting back for the Second Amendment. There's activism, there's lawsuits, there's education. There's all these different arms. And the fact that we're all fighting hard for this is great. And it's working.
So let's say that the Supreme Court clerk gets back to them and says the Supreme Court is, going to, I guess, consider hearing this case. Then we're good until the Supreme Court decides?
Actually, it's even a little bit broader than that. So the clerk from the Supreme Court will get back to the state of California and say, hey, you know what? Their request has been received.
That's it.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So then the Supreme Court will spend months.
They don't move that fast.
Yeah.
Years
They don't.
deciding.
Yeah.
They don't.
The only reason I think they might move that fast or move faster than normal is they've already commented on this case. They've
Yes.
already said, hey, you guys need to revisit this because this is not what Bruin says. So maybe that'll speed things up.
Maybe.
But the Supreme Court clerk, they just have to say, hey, you know what? Request received. Boom. Injunction stays in place. And then they got it, like I said, they got to hear from the state of California, and they back and forth, and blah, blah, blah. And then at some point, the Supreme Court will decide to hear it or not to hear it. If they decide to not hear it, mags are illegal. If the Supreme Court says we're not going to hear this case, then boom, normal capacity magazines in California are illegal. If they decide to hear it, it's going to take months and months and months. Then they'll, hear it, they'll issue a decision, and then we'll have to see.
So what if the Supreme Court clerk doesn't say that it's been received?
Then
Is that a possibility? Does that happen?
I mean, the only way that would legitimately happen is if the Duncan case attorneys didn't request,
I see.
for the Supreme Court to review
If
it.
some paperwork was missed or something, perhaps.
So those attorneys have one freaking job right now, and it's like
Don't let us down.
Yeah, no, but there's not an attorney in the nation that forgets to ask the Supreme Court to review their case. So,
Okay.
it'll probably take a little bit of time. I don't know if they're going to do it on day 5 or day 89, but it'll get done before day 90. If it doesn't, that's there's just very little chance that they, focus on other things than asking the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So they'll get it. The Supreme Court will acknowledge. Ninth Circuit Court will say, "Okay, good to go," and then then it's kind of in the Supreme Court's court.
Awesome.
The ball is in the Supreme Court's court. Okay. All right. CCW reciprocity is looking more and more like a reality. Will your rights finally be recognized across state lines? You only need one driver's license. You can drive in all 50 states. So why isn't your CCW like that? Well, it's looking like reciprocity is actually a very real version. There's actually 2 versions, but a very real version has a chance of passing in Congress. And this is a congressional thing. This has to happen from Congress. It's a federal thing. Each state has its own rules and its own permit. Each of the states actually has to go to other states to work out a reciprocity agreement. So if you're the state of whatever, Wyoming or Utah, you have to reach out to 49 other states and say, hey, we'll recognize yours if you recognize ours, And that is exactly why the federal government exists. The Second Amendment is clearly in the realm of the federal government, and these kinds of disagreements or agreements, it's exactly what the federal government's job is. So, H.R. 38, the House Judiciary Committee voted and it advanced to the floor really quick, which is a very good sign. They had reciprocity in a Republican Congress under Trump before, and it died. But man, this went really, really quick. This is very unusual. But it's a different situation. We're now in a country where 29 states have constitutional carry, and it looks like there's going to be a 30th. I think is it North Carolina is about to become the 30th?
Yes, I believe they are.
So we're in a very, very different situation. We're in a situation where the president's administration has a civil rights division that is investigating Second Amendment violations. Very, very different than his first time around. So what's this mean? Well, in general, this is good. Everybody wants reciprocity. I want my permit to be good in all 50 states. But there's a lot to think about. We don't really know exactly what it means. There's a couple of different possibilities. One is that it could mean that the rights of your state follow you around. So if you live in a constitutional carry state, you don't need a permit in any other state. That's one possibility. Another possibility is whether or not your state is constitutional carry, you still might have to get a permit so that you can show all the other 49 states that, hey, I got a permit. If you're here in California, does it mean that if you live in California and you have a Utah or an Arizona, that California has to acknowledge it. Well, it might mean that you have to get a CCW from your state in order for it to be acknowledged by other states. There's a lot to this. One of the other considerations is, let's say that you live in California and you can get a Utah permit, okay? And then that Utah permit is good in all 50 states. Well, a Utah permit, which I've had for years, and folks get, Arizona and Nevada and Florida.
Yeah.
The Utah permit is super easy to get, right?
Right.
So it's going to put a lot of people out of business. It's going to put a lot of instructors out of business, which you kind of have mixed feelings about, right? I mean, we have our rights, but, geez, I don't know. So there's a lot to consider on this thing.
Well, I think one of the interesting pieces about the HR 38 text is that it mentions specifically that the person has to be carrying a valid license or permit, which is issued pursuant to the law of the state and which permits the person to carry a concealed firearm in the state in which the person resides.
Right.
So it sounds like you would need. Go ahead.
I was going to say that. So that is the current reading. That's the current, like how it's, but that could change today.
Could change. Yes,
next week.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I think that's probably the most likely scenario.
Right.
And you were going to say it sounds like you have to have a permit from
in your state, which I would argue is not necessarily the fairest way to do reciprocity. Because if I live in a very difficult state to get a CCW, but I go and I travel to a state where it's very easy to get a permit, why can't I carry a gun in that state? The reciprocity thing can almost make it more challenging for people who are coming from a non-friendly CCW state and traveling through a friendly CCW state, because you have to wait until you get a resident permit in the state you reside. So that's a little tricky.
I agree. I think that it was. I don't think that's what they want.
No.
The authors. I think that that's what they think will be the least likely to get struck down in court.
Right. Agreed completely.
Which
I think
is
we have
another
to start,
consideration.
We have to start somewhere. I think this is a good place to start.
Yeah.
And whether or not this is the end game, I don't know.
Yeah, and the gun community, we're really bad. We do a lot of things. We make mountains out of molehills, And the other thing is what's that saying? The enemy of good is great, or something like that, or great is the enemy of good, or
I think it's like perfect is the enemy of good, right? Like if you strive for perfection, you miss out on a lot of good things along the way.
So I know there's a lot of people that are super dedicated to the Second Amendment that are going, hey, this ain't good enough, so I'm just going to fold my arms and sit there on the sidelines. There really is a lot more. I totally, by the way, respect their passion, but there is a lot to be said, and there's a lot of evidence that incremental improvements is, has worked. And so if we get some form of reciprocity, whether it's the exact way HR 38 is written now or it's slightly different, whatever, it's a great step forward.
Yes.
It's a win.
Yeah, this is a huge win. I am not saying that we should be upset about HR. This is a fantastic win. I just think that we may get some unintended consequences living in a state like California. It's going to be great for people who live in Arizona and want to come vacation in San Diego, but it may end up hurting people who are still in the waiting process. But that doesn't matter. Like, we shouldn't be stuck on that point. We should just be happy that we're making progress on reciprocity.
Making progress. And by the way, we don't know what the Senate's going to do. There's a lot of jerks in the Senate.
Yes.
So there's...
What?
Yeah, I know. It's shocking. Okay, there are actually a few bills introduced in Sacramento. There were a lot of bills introduced in Sacramento this week, and we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about them over the next couple of weeks, months, as they progress. But I got to remind you, once something is introduced in Sacramento, or Washington, D.C. for that matter, very little you can do about it. Phone calls and emails, important, but on the scale of effective to ineffective, very ineffective. By the time a bill is introduced and it's being voted on in Sacramento, your phone calls and emails mean almost nothing. Their minds are already made up. So we're going to talk about them. We don't know what these bills are going to look like in a week, a month, 6 months when they're actually voted on, but we are going to talk about them. There's some great places out there that you can get some great information on them. I think probably the best is Copper Jacket. On YouTube, that guy does a great job of breaking down these bills, and I'm not sure how much more we could add to it, but we'll talk about it for sure. But really what I want to remind you to do is get active. We need to be prevention rather than cure. We need to get the right people elected on the local level so that they become the right people that go to Sacramento and Washington, D.C. And step one is join. Join San Diego County Gun Owners, join Inland Empire Gun Owners, join Orange County Gun Owners, or join another group. If you don't like us, join NRA. Or if you're not in those 4 counties that we cover, join NRA. They're coming back strong. NRA 2.0 looks like a very real and cool thing. But it's important that you get involved with activism. Okay, that's all you need to know this week.
Okay, that's our legal and legislative segment.
Okay, let's talk about deployment. So we talked about the bills, we talked about the lawsuits, we talked about some of the things that's going right and wrong, but knowing about a lawsuit is not activism. Understanding a bill that's being proposed and mulled over, that's not activism. What you want to do is get involved. There's only 2 ways to influence politics, and that's people and money. The more people, the more money you have, the more influence you'll have, the more ability we have to restore and protect our Second Amendment rights. So we make activism easy, and in the deployment section, we're going to talk about how. This is brought to you by Red, White, and Badass Brew Coffee. Go to rwbbcoffee.com, rwbbcoffee.com. Use code GOR, and you'll get 15% off. Wonderful, wonderful coffee. Okay, first thing we need you to do is show up at Second Amendment Comedy Night. Tickets are on sale now, only $20, or if you want to go to the reception beforehand and mix and mingle and have a bite to eat, $25, so it's an additional $5. That's happening on April 30th, and that caps off an entire month of Not Me activities because it is Not Me's 6th anniversary. So happy hour, doors open at 5:30. The comedy show starts at 7. And it's in the Claremont area. Go to sdcgo.org for more information and to buy tickets. Buy them today. I expect we're going to sell out on this, so you're going to want to buy your tickets ASAP. It counts as date night, so bring your spouse. Tabletops, shooting socials. Two of the most common things that we do when it comes to activism is that we get you involved in spreading the message to new shooters and to people who need to get more involved. So you can teach somebody to shoot at one of our shooting socials. You can have a blast at our tabletops. We set them up, and if you go to our website, sdcgo.org/volunteer, you'll see all the opportunities that we have set up for you. We'll give you a free t-shirt. You'll never be alone. You'll always have somebody there teaching you how to do what you need to do. So go to the website, pick a date that works for you, sign up to give out information at a tabletop, or sign up to teach somebody to shoot for the first time. We need you to get involved. Okay, Intro to Communications class, upgraded with Meshtastic gear. We've done this class a couple of times, and it's really, really popular. The next one is May 10th, 2025, so it's just in about a month or so. It's in Oceanside. Take our off-grid comms class and get your own Meshtastic device. John, one of the San Diego County Gun Owners board members, has added more training on this cutting-edge technology. Why is Meshtastic valuable? Meshtastic lets you send texts and share location data without cell service, Wi-Fi, or satellites. It's all through a self-healing mesh network that you control. It's open source, low cost, and insanely powerful once you know how to use it. Sign up at Gun Owners Radio website. So that's gunownersradio.com. Sign up now. This is definitely going to sell out. And then join the Prepared Protector First Aid for Armed Citizens class. Gunfights are rare. Trauma is not. So you want to learn real-world first aid skills every armed citizen should know. Sign up at the Prepared Protector First Aid for Armed Citizens class. That's happening on May 17th at Cargo in El Cajon. Students also take home an IFAC. That's an individual first aid kit with the critical gear handpicked by Aaron Pettengill. Retail value is $145, but you get it for taking the class. So you want to get the skills, get the practice, and get the gear you need to be a prepared protector. Sign up at gunownersradio.com, gunownersradio.com, right on the website. Stay informed, get trained, be part of the community, and we will see you there. That's your deployment. Okay, our next guest is Mayor of Vista, John Franklin. He's fresh off of a shoot that we had, a really fun shoot, outdoor shoot that he sponsored and came with us and had a lot of fun. And he is running for the County Board of Supervisors up in North County. We wanted to bring him on and talk to him. Mayor, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Michael. I cannot thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to sponsor that shoot. That was one of the best time shooting I've ever had. Great facility, a lot of fun and camaraderie with fellow gun owners. I cannot wait to do it again.
It was a lot of fun. I got a lot of positive feedback. It was outdoors, and it's tough to find outdoor shooting areas in San Diego County. So people loved the opportunity to go outdoors and shoot. It was a perfect day as far as weather. And I got to shoot your 308, which was awesome.
That's a great gun.
It's my shoulder's just fine. I have shoulders of steel. But yeah, thanks so much for sponsoring that and coming out. And I know, like I said, got a lot of positive feedback from everybody, and they really enjoyed it. So you have been in politics for a long time. You've been around various political organizations. You've been involved in the Republican Party. You've been on the City Council of Vista, now the mayor of Vista, and you are wanting to move on and running a campaign to win as far as county board. So talk a little bit about what motivated you. Why are you in politics? Why are you passionate about it?
Well, I've been a son of two small business owners my whole life, and now I'm a small business owner with my wife. We have 5 employees. We understand what it means to sign the front of a paycheck. I've always believed in limited government. I've always believed in lower taxes, and I've always believed in free markets. I just believe that we can make better decisions for ourselves most of the time than the government can for us. So I think when we have the maximum amount of freedom and liberty, and government does only the things for us that we cannot do ourselves, I think we're all a little bit better off.
And I got to tell you, 10 years ago, before San Diego County gun owners, getting someone who's running for office to, stand up for Second Amendment was very difficult. In fact, it was damn near impossible in a lot of situations. And you didn't just stand up. You said, hey, I want to sponsor an outdoor shoot and get a bunch of people together and celebrate. Why is the Second Amendment important to you?
Well, the Second Amendment is the one that underpins all of our other rights. The First Amendment is, of course, the most important, the one that gives us the right to have discourse. But ultimately, without a government that has a respect for the powers of the citizenry, we won't have a First Amendment for long. The Second Amendment is the one that has protected the first since 1776, and or I guess more like 17. What was the Bill of Rights? 1789 was the Constitution. 1791, yeah. So since 1791, the Second Amendment has protected all of our other rights. And I really believe that's what it comes down to. I hear a lot of Republicans talk about the right to defend oneself in their home and the right to hunt. And those are important, but the right to a free society, the right to a society which always remembers how we got here. I've been a student and lover of the history of revolutionary America and the revolution my entire life. It's important to understand that the king's government was a lawful government, one that we overthrew because it was no longer serving our interests. And if you really read the Declaration of Independence, it says clearly that government is instituted among men, securing its powers from the consent of the governed, but it's instituted to protect our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or property, as Locke called it, right? It's important that government continues to protect those ends. If it doesn't, as we said, as Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, he said it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish such forms as to which they've become accustomed. He says when government evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to institute new government, which to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
So
that's the history of how we got here. And that's also, even though that may be, 260 whatever years ago, that is still the future of how we remain a free people. If we don't understand where we've been, we have no idea where we're going and how we're going to continue to protect our freedoms.
And the people in Vista, they voted you onto the city council, and then they voted you as mayor. So I think they generally, there must be a big pocket of Second Amendment lovers in Vista. Has your views on the Second Amendment been questioned or praised, or how has it been being the mayor of Vista and such a strong supporter of Second Amendment?
The left always wants to use your stance in favor of our constitutional rights to attack you, make you sound extreme. The reality is, I support responsible, lawful gun ownership, as we all do. And my whole life, I've advocated for the enforcement of our existing laws. When people commit crimes with guns, they should be prosecuted to the fullest. That's why I've strongly advocated for more law enforcement in our city. When people commit crimes, they have to be held to account. We cannot create laws to attempt to deprive people the means of criminality and hope that that's going to reduce criminality. Only actually punishing criminal behavior will ensure that what's called the general deterrence effect in criminal justice. We study this idea that if there's a belief that if I commit a crime, that I will be prosecuted and incarcerated, there's a greater likelihood that the criminal doesn't commit that crime to begin with. This is very important. Unfortunately, because of our lack of support generally for law enforcement, we have fallen below that minimum threshold level where criminals believe, I'm going to get caught. I'm going to pay a price. And so criminality has taken over in California. We eliminated bail. We're not prosecuting people for almost anything now but violent crimes. And it's got to change. We need leaders that stand up for law and order. And why is that important to gun owners? Because when crime is allowed to run rampant, centrist voters that haven't thought a lot about these issues, they start to buy into ideas like gun control laws that won't actually make them safer. They'll only hamper law-abiding citizens, while the person who's, my city in Vista, we have a lot of gang crime. I'm fighting right now for another gang detective to help address that crime. But the gangbangers, they carry around unlawful weapons. They break the gun laws. They're not paying attention to the law. But you and I, who are people in society that care about our reputation, I would never violate the law. And I know none of my law-abiding friends would, because it would destroy our reputation, it would ruin our lives. But the gangbanger doesn't care about the gun law. So the only person that's regulated whose behavior will change because of these laws are law-abiding gun owners. It won't affect the people who are carrying illegal guns already.
And, I don't think I've ever talked about this, but, back a few years ago, before they were issuing CCWs in San Diego, the previous sheriff just wasn't comfortable. We finally brought him around, and he finally started issuing, which is great. But you and I had a series of conversations together to try to figure it out, try to push back. And one thing I don't know if I've ever even mentioned, but you were even entertaining the idea of creating the position in Vista of a police chief that would basically, their sole responsibility would be to issue CCWs. This was something that was very important to you, something you believed in a lot. Now, fortunately, we got the sheriff to do the right thing, and he did start to issue CCWs, and then a few years later, the Bruin decision from the Supreme Court came down, and it's been wonderful ever since. Well, it could be better, but it's been, we can at least get our permits. So, why are CCWs, why was it so important to you to get these issued to, sane, trained, law-abiding gun owners back in the day?
Well, I've studied this question for many years. I've looked at research that came out of Florida, which has had concealed carry for many decades now. The incidence of gun crime amongst individuals licensed to carry concealed is less than those in the general public. People who have gone through the training, the licensure, and all of the laws that they have to comply with to carry lawfully, they commit fewer crimes. And I believe that we're in a safer society. For my friends in the Jewish community who've been attacked with, firearms in their congregations, or our parents who worry about their kids going to school, we need responsible, well-trained, mature gun owners doing the right thing to carry, to protect others, so that we have a reduction in violent crime. I mean, we all know when there's an active shooter incident, if there's somebody to return fire, those of us who've actually handled firearms understand one principle above all others, which is, if somebody was shooting back at you, all of a sudden your ability to focus on what you're doing goes out the window and you look for a place to hide. it is important that law enforcement or a law-abiding citizen is able to return fire to somebody who's attacking innocent people immediately. And we know that it's not possible, nor would it be right, to try and confiscate guns from every law-abiding gun owner. It's impossible to take them at the same time out of the hands of all the criminals. We just can't stop all of these crimes, although that's our goal. But we have to be prepared to defend ourselves as citizens. So I do believe, and I also believe the Second Amendment says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And, you know, my definition of bear means to carry upon one's person. It's pretty clear. I don't actually agree with the law that, you know, they have to, California says, you know, they got rid of open carry. I think the Constitution protects the right for both. And what we've done, and the reason I'm such a big supporter of yours, Michael, and of gun owners of San Diego County is because you have done incredible things in the courtroom to restore our constitutional rights. I've been very impressed. As an organization, you've punched way above your weight. Your members, I think you have 4,000 members, right? You guys have come together to do some just incredible things that, you know, a lot of people wouldn't have expected a local organization to be able to accomplish. I saw it in the work that you and I did together to restore our CCW rights. Just very impressive. And that's why I'm a strong supporter of you and the work that San Diego County gun owners do.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and we have, I swear, the best members in the nation. Absolutely wonderful members. They do such a good job. So let's talk about, so you're running for County Board of Supervisor. There are 5 on the county board, and they basically, 5 different districts that cover the entire county. And I don't think people really truly paid attention to the county board pre-COVID. Then it got real clear just how important the county board was. But we've known for a while when it comes to Second Amendment and your ability to shoot, and your ability to have places and to shoot outdoors. We've known for a while that the county board is extremely important, you know, we being the gun owner community.
Right.
So far, you have 2 opponents. We're not going to mention who they are, but you have a Republican and a Democrat at least, and both of them not good on Second Amendment. Not good at all. So talk about first, let's start off. Talk about the district. What's in your district? Talk about the makeup of your district.
So I'm Oceanside, Vista, San Marcos, Escondido, Fallbrook, Valley Center, Bonsall, Borrego Springs, Rainbow, and a few other unincorporated communities. It's basically the northern 1/5 of the geography of the county. So that 78 highway corridor.
And so I would imagine, especially with places, you know, some of the unincorporated areas, Fallbrook and, you know, San Marcos has a shooting range. Oceanside has a shooting range. You know, that whole 78 corridor there. You can, you know, there's like a half a dozen places you can stop and buy guns and ammo. I would imagine that your district is very strong when it comes to Second Amendment rights. Is that something you've seen and experienced?
100%. I'm very proud to be friends with Darren Prince and Stan Tuna, who built the North County Shooting Sports Center in San Marcos. Great facility. I shot IPA, which is the International Pistol Association, competitive pistol shooting at Iron Sights for years before I got married. I've been a responsible, law-abiding gun owner since I was 13 years of age. I went through gun safety and hunter safety education in the state of Kansas, where I'm from. Where I grew up, hunting and shooting were a part of life. I joined the Kansas Field Dog and Gun Club at the age of 16. I love to shoot trap. To me, it's just a normal part of life. My father taught me how to have appropriate respect for the safety and handling of a firearm. And it's something that I've passed along to many people in my life, many of whom have never handled or fired a firearm, and they have a fear of it. And I understand that fear for those who have never handled a firearm. But I fear firearms in the hands of criminals, not in the hands of law-abiding citizens, because responsible adult law-abiding citizens have a healthy fear of the power and of what a firearm can do. And they handle and operate them safely, store them safely, keep them away from children. So I'm here to protect their rights and to make sure that we have the right to enjoy the sports, the shooting sports, hunting, and the right to protect ourselves in our homes and to maintain, what Jefferson said was the paramount to protecting our liberties here in America. So just proud to be able to represent and defend our Constitution.
Perfect. And if you win, you'll be replacing Jim Desmond, who is he's terming out in 2 years. He's
That's
running
right.
for Congress, and I wish him the very best of luck. He's been a fantastic friend to us.
Yes.
He's done some great things. He's made some very bold stances, which is fantastic. Last question? What's if you get in, which we're going to help you get in. We're going to help you get elected.
Thank you.
The gun owner community in San Diego. When that happens, what's your number one priority? You know, why would people vote for you? We've talked a lot about the Second Amendment. That's great, but talk maybe broader, philosophically, or specifically some things you want to change. You know, why should people vote for you for County Board of Supervisors in the North County there?
In the last 5 years, we hired 2,500 new employees at the county. That was an expansion of 13% of our county payroll. Now, shockingly, not shockingly, we're in a $138.5 million deficit as a county. We've cut the sheriff's budget by 2.5%. We have cut the district attorney's budget by 2.5%. Here we are not enforcing our laws, not prosecuting criminals, not jailing people for crime. And then we're going to talk about imposing all kinds of new restrictions on lawful gun owners to try and stop crime. What we need to do is punish people who commit crimes. And I know that the entire gun owner community is deeply committed to that. I am. That's a big thing. The County Board of Supervisors administrates and funds the justice system for the state of California in San Diego County. They fund the DA's office, they fund the sheriff's office, and very important, they also fund the mental health and health departments. We figured that out. All of us as citizens did during COVID. We have an epidemic of homelessness on our streets because we walk up to people today wrongly and we say, would you like to come with us to the shelter or would you like to stay here on the street? Those should not be the options. The options, if we truly love the people who are living on the street and dying on the street, it should be, do you want to come with us to the shelter or do you want to come involuntarily to the hospital on a 5150 mental health hold, and we're going to get you into conservatorship program where you can get free of your addictions, you can get help with your severe mental illness, but we're not going to let you die out here on the street. You know, we have 6,600 unsheltered people on the streets of San Diego County. 400 of them die every single year outside, most of them of overdose. That is a 6% rate of death. Over 5 years, it's 30% rate of death. Think about that next time you drive by somebody who is living outdoors. They have a 30% probability of death. Your probability of dying on death row in San Quentin in California is much lower than your probability of dying if you're living on the streets. The question is, do you care about this human being that you see? Do you realize that's somebody's son? That's somebody's brother? Do you care about his mother and how she suffers in anguish because society refuses to help her son? And he's an adult now. She can't make him. But society does have a tool. Ronald Reagan signed the Lanterman-Petraeus Short Conservatorship Act as governor of California in 1967. It said if you cannot feed, clothe, or shelter yourself, that you could be subject to a conservatorship. It's very important when we see people who are refusing the help that we're offering. When we have a shelter bed, when we have a treatment bed, and you say no, and you won't take the help we're offering, then like Rudy Giuliani did in New York City, we have to give them two options. Come with us voluntarily or come with us involuntarily. But the option to stay here and to die here is no longer an option that a loving, compassionate, and moral society is going to afford you. I believe truly in my heart, I know it for a fact, we can solve the homeless epidemic in our county, but only if we love those people on the street enough, like the Good Samaritan did, to pick you up, even if you're passed out and incapacitated, or you're too sick to know that you're sick and you're not able to make healthy choices for yourself. And we bring you home and we love you and make you well again. And we do it not only for you, but we also do it for your mother and your father. And you know what? Yes, we do it for all the rest of us who want to enjoy a clean and a safe community. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. And no voter should be embarrassed to say, you know, I'd like to live in the clean community I bought a home in 20 years ago, 10 years ago. There's nothing wrong with wanting a clean community, but also understanding that tough love is about actually wanting to save the lives of the individuals we see out there. As you can tell, I'm deeply passionate about this. I've studied it, I think, more than any elected leader in the county. I know what I'm talking about. I've spent a lot of time visiting, not only with mental health providers, also with outreach workers, but also I spend a lot of time talking to people living in the encampments. And I have spent many days walking with social workers, asking people to say yes to the help that we're offering and watching them look at me and go, no, man, I'm good. I want to stay here. But that's the addiction talking. That's the severe mental illness talking. That's not a healthy human being that's making a choice to live outdoors. And we shouldn't allow people to make an unhealthy choice that is literally going to imminently end in their death. It's wrong.
All right, John. Thank you so much. Mayor John Franklin.
Thanks for having me,
running
Michael.
for county board. What's your website? Where should people go to donate for your run for office there?
MayorFranklin.com, just like Benjamin spelled it. Mayor, FRANKLIN.com.
Great. John Franklin, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Michael.
you spending time with us.
All right, take care.
Yeah, I don't think people realize he was talking about the cuts to the county budget. The county's taking in more revenue. They're not, it's not that they're losing revenue and that's why they made these cuts to law enforcement. It's a philosophical thing. It's not an economic thing. And I don't think people realize when you hear like, well, gee, they cut the sheriff's budget by 1 or 2%. Who cares? It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
You could take a small portion of 1 or 2% of the sheriff's budget and you could hire 20 people in licensing to issue CCWs. It's a lot of money. So anyway, Mayor John Franklin from Vista running for County Board of Supervisors in 2026. It's 2025. It's the beginning of 2025. It's not even the middle of 2025. We're already talking about November of 2026.
I say it's refreshing to hear his take on gun ownership and his passion for it.
Yeah, right?
Yep.
It was refreshing to shoot his M14 too, 308. That was refreshing. I got to tell you, I kind of fell in love with that thing. That was really nice. So, all right, cool. There you go, John Franklin.
I like it.
Stump My Nephew, everybody's favorite segment. We found out years ago that my nephew is extremely good when it comes to gun trivia. So if you write us and send us a question and it's gun trivia, if we use it on the air, we'll send you a hat or a shirt, whatever you prefer. And if you stump my nephew, which isn't going to happen, guy's amazing, we'll give you a cool special gift. This segment sponsored by Seal One. Seal One is awesome. If you're not buying Seal One by now, buy Seal One. You can go to their website, seal1.com, seal1.com, or go to your favorite gun shop and ask them why they're not carrying Seal One. If they're not, or if they are, buy it. Cleaning your gun shouldn't take forever. Seal One makes it faster and easier so you can spend more time on the range or just living your life. Seal One is one and done, and now what everyone's been waiting for, Seal One is finally available in an aerosol. So that means that it's even quicker, there's no hassle, just spray and wipe and you're good to go. Everything that you would normally use WD-40 for, you can now use Seal One in their aerosol can. Check them out, support them because they support us. They're absolutely a fantastic group. Seal1.com, one and done with Seal One. Okay, Sam the Gunman. How you doing, bud?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Good. I like your shirt.
Thanks.
It's awesome. Yeah. So, okay. So I think I got to tell you, this one's right up your alley, my friend. I think you're going to get this one. So without further ado, looks like, okay, Dakota, why don't you go ahead and ask the question?
We've got a question from Bill Smith from Valley Center. And before I read the question, Michael, you were telling me about the pronunciation of a particular firearm.
Yeah.
And I want to say you said it's Garand, not Garand, not Garand.
Exactly.
Can you tell me?
It's Garand, and that we learned that from Sam. He actually wrote a really fantastic article on the Garand, and in an interview about the article, he said that the family pronounces it Garand. And we actually have T-shirts. I don't know if they're still up, but we actually have T-shirts on gunownersradio.com that you can buy. And on the back, it says, actually, it's pronounced Garand, which is wonderfully obnoxious.
I'll do my best to say that right when I read this question. So the question from Bill Smith from Valley Center is Beretta BM59 versus Garand. What are some differences and what is one way they are the same?
Bill Smith from Valley Center. Thanks very much for writing in. Now, first of all, the Garand versus Garand thing is not like that's not a useful fact. It's just a way to be obnoxious.
Yeah.
Which I guess
is important. That's an important piece of firearm history, is being obnoxious with
Well, yeah,
pronunciations.
the only reason to study history is so that you can correct people on the internet. Everyone knows that. So the BM59 and the M1, what are some what are some differences, and what's the main similarity? Well, I'll start with the similarity there, that BM59s are based on M1 receivers. The Beretta BM59 was the Italian Army's service rifle during the early part of the Cold War. They had a large number of M1s that they had received from the United States as military aid, and they figured that with the country devastated after World War II and not having a huge amount of heavy industry, it would be easier to rebuild M1s and reuse tooling and that kind of thing into new rifles fed by detachable box magazines and with some other modern features than it would be to design some whole new rifle from scratch. So the similarity is that the BM59 is an evolution of the M1. Some differences include, first of all, the BM59 is not chambered for 30-06. It uses 7.62 NATO because that was was and is a standard type of ammunition for NATO. It is, don't quote me on this, I think it's STANAG 4172 that specifies it's that one's either 762 or 556, but you can look up the standardization agreements on your own to get the specs. Another difference is that the BM59 uses a detachable box magazine, kind of like the M14 does. I don't know if the magazines are interchangeable. I don't think they are between the BM59 and the M14 because they were developed separately, but they do use a similar magazine at the very least. Another difference is the BM59 has a folding stock, a pretty distinctive one in terms of appearance. It's this triangular metal folding stock and just a little small, sort of weird looking pistol grip separate from that. And that in combination with its shorter barrel was to help with motorized infantry, mechanized infantry, airborne infantry getting in and out of vehicles. Having that more compact size for transportation is always helpful.
Well, I would say you did a pretty good job.
Dakota, what did you ask me after the show last week? Do you remember?
I asked you if this was fake. I asked you if you give him the questions ahead of time.
Nope. You do not get the questions. Do you get the questions ahead of time, Sam?
I do not.
No. Okay, so go ahead and read the answer there. I'll read it. The BM59 is an automatic battle rifle developed in Italy in 1959. It is based on the M1 Garand rifle, chambered in 7.62 by 51 NATO, modified to use a detachable magazine, as you pointed out, and capable of selective fire. Later revisions incorporated other features common to more modern rifles. After World War II, Italy adopted the U.S.-designed M1 Garand rifle in 30-06 Springfield and also manufactured it under license. The semi-automatic rifle proved itself well during World War II, but in the late 1950s it was considered outdated and obsolete. And the Italian military also wanted a new rifle chambered in NATO standard 7.62 by 51. To meet these requirements, Beretta designed the BM59, which was essentially a rechambered M1 fitted with a removable 20-round magazine, folding bipod, and combined muzzle brake or flash, suppressor, rifle, grenade launcher. The BM59 is capable of select fire. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, he nailed it. Don't forget to send in your questions for Sam next week. You can do that by going to gunownersradio.com, scrolling all the way down to the bottom. I think it's called Stump My Nephew on the little link tree at the bottom there. So send in your questions. Maybe get a free hat.
There you go. All right, Sam. Thanks, bud. We'll talk to you next week, okay?
Yep, thanks for having me on.
Awesome job. All right, let's do our next segment, Curtain Call, where we talk about defensive gun use. Alicia Curtin, her last name, of course, is Curtin, which is why we call it the Curtain Call. So what do we got this week, Alicia?
So this week we have an article. It does come from uscarry.com. The title is Homeowner Fires at Intruders During Second Floor Break-In, an attempt here in Chino Hills, California.
Gotcha. What happened?
So this happened just a little over a week ago, just April 2nd of this year. So it had occurred at 8:22 p.m., so evening. You know, some of us may be in bed, some of us maybe not. But it was evening. And what's important about this article is the mention and the knowledge that it occurred on a second floor. So if you live in an apartment or you have a two-story home, oftentimes I think a lot of us think, you know, on that second floor, I'm pretty safe, right? You know, I'm you know, I don't, I got to lock my downstairs, but you know, if I'm, you know, the second story,
At least safer.
Right.
Sure.
So what occurred is that at 8:22 p.m., two men broke into the upper level of this home. They busted through a sliding glass door, broke the glass, and entered the home.
Wow.
So there were two persons. One of them did meet up with the homeowner in the home. The homeowner then did fire a firearm in self-defense.
Yeah.
We do not know if either of these two people were hit. They were not caught. They, apparently in response to that firearm, it was effective. They left. There was concern that one of them may still be in the home, but police did a really good sweep through the home. Didn't find anybody. No one turned up in the hospitals with an injury.
So multiple intruders.
Multiple.
And this person is alive today because he or she?
I believe it was a male.
He had a firearm. Did it talk about the type of firearm? Pistol?
It does not. No.
This is Chino Hills, huh?
Chino Hills.
Interesting.
Actually, no, it doesn't specify male or female. That was my assumption. It just says the homeowner.
So what are your thoughts? Yeah. What are your thoughts on, the fact they broke into a second story, the fact that this guy was able to get to his gun, by the way. It wasn't locked up and unloaded.
10 minutes to get his cable lock off that gun.
Multiple adversaries. At least two? Do we know?
It states two.
Okay.
I mean, clearly, could there have been more? There could be. I mean, we don't know. It was reported as two. Neither were found. So the assumption is that it was two. I think a couple important takeaways. One is the access to the firearm. Mm-hmm. If you do have a home with multiple floors, where do you keep your guns? Do you keep everything in a safe in your bedroom? Do you maybe stage something downstairs and something upstairs? You kind of think, do we have them staged for self-defense? Should we need them, or do we simply just store them so that they're secure but not necessarily easy for access? So kind of two different mindsets, right?
Choice is up to you. It's not. Choice. There's not a right answer.
Right.
It totally depends on
absolutely
what you got going on.
So I think the key is just give it some thought. I think a lot of people just lock their stuff up, but they don't really put time into thinking, should I need it? How am I going to get it?
Yeah.
Right? What's the reality? What's the likelihood of being able to get to it? Where do I spend a majority of my time in my home? Maybe I don't have them stored in the proper room to where I spend a majority of my time. Kind of give that some thought.
There you go.
Not only that, but on the second floor, do we fail to lock our doors? In this case, they busted through the door, which tells me it likely was locked. So in this case, it wouldn't have mattered. But kind of give some thought to a second story home. Maybe lock and secure. We're seeing that these people clearly climbed up something. We don't know what they climbed up, but they did climb something to get access to that second floor. Your second floor is not as secure as you might have thought, just because it's not ground level.
There you go. Okay, well. There you go. Defensive gun use. Talk about it. Take this segment, send it to your friends. Maybe somebody's on the fence, or maybe somebody that's anti-gun. Let them know, like, hey, there's a person in Chino Hills just last month, 2 months ago?
April 2nd.
Just, the other day, who is alive thanks to the fact that they had access to a gun, that they owned a gun, and they were proficient with a firearm.
The dedication it took for these people to climb up to a second story and get in, right? They weren't likely going to retreat easy. It was the firearm, I think, that made that difference.
That's crazy. Yeah. Awesome job. All right. That is your curtain call. Awesome. Okay. Shoot you straight. No bull, just straight shooting on today's hottest gun and political topics. It's time for the Straight Shooter segment. Okay, so I got a big announcement. I don't know, mixed feelings about
I'm
this.
not excited about this one at all.
Really?
No.
Okay, well, I definitely wasn't excited when I saw what was happening, but then when I started getting out into the specifics, I thought, this doesn't really affect me in any way. So turns out that Glock, which is a gun manufacturer that maybe you've heard of, they are discontinuing models. I don't mean that they're not going to sell them in California anymore. I mean they're completely and totally ending manufacture of these models. So I want to go over it. There's a lot. I don't have them all here. And I think we'll probably create a graphic and post it up on a website or something like that. But let's start with the 40 calibers. 40 cal. Glock 22 Gen 3 and Gen 5, totally gone. Glock 27 Gen 3 and Gen 5, totally gone. Glock 35 Gen 3, totally gone. That's the 40 caliber Smith & Wesson. You know,
Smith,
what?
Smith and Wesson.
Yeah, what is it?
Gen 3? Glock 35 Gen 3?
Oh, he's saying the caliber.
Yeah, the caliber.
Oh,
yeah, so 40 caliber. Smith & Wesson 40 caliber. Smith & Wesson created the 40 caliber.
I'm with you now.
Glock made the guns.
Thank you.
So the 40 caliber cartridge in general, I don't know if you know this or not, but they're real hot in the 90s. And law enforcement started using 40 cal. I won't get too deep into why they started using 40 cal, but they wanted something that was less than a 10 millimeter and more than a 9 millimeter. They settled on a 40 cal. What killed the 40 cal is the global war on terrorism. One of the things that killed it. A lot of law enforcement were actually going overseas to do investigations in war zones. Well, when you get into a war zone, the only thing they got over there is 9 millimeter. The military they didn't carry 40 cal. So for convenience and for access, 40 cal started going by the wayside. No matter the caliber, you're going to get it kind of lives and dies by military use. If the military starts to use your caliber, you're in good position. If they stop using your caliber, you might go the way of the dodo. So they stopped making those 40 cals. 45 ACP, the Glock 21 SF short frame, Gen 3, gone, which is super interesting. I can't believe that one.
That's actually decently popular for concealed carry with men. I've had quite a few of those come through. Yeah.
The 10 millimeter Glock 29 SF, gone, not manufacturing. 9 millimeters Glock 34 Gen 3 and Gen 5, Glock 43, that's got the night sights on it, and then a Glock. In fact, by the way, it looks like a lot of the Glocks that had non-Glock night sights are going bye-bye, which is interesting. I don't know what that means. Maybe Glock's coming out with their own night sights. I don't know. Glock 49. Glock 49 was kind of interesting. It was a Glock 19 grip and a Glock 17 slide. And I don't know anybody that's ever even considered buying that thing. So I'm not surprised it's gone. The other thing is it sounds really close to... Like, I think if you're looking at something with a Glock 19 stock and a Glock 17 slide, why wouldn't you just buy a Glock 34? You know, it's kind of dangerously close, kind of fills the same need. So it doesn't surprise me that it wasn't all that popular.
Well, the 34 is gone anyway, so it's not an option either.
Oh, wait. 34? My thing, is that the competition gun?
34 is it's the 5-inch. It's the longest barrel.
Longer
Yeah.
slide.
So
Oh my gosh.
The 17 is slightly shorter, and it also has a port cut on the slide.
Oh, that's right. I just read that and totally got by me. 357 SIG, Glock 33, Glock 32, Glock 31. So the 31, 32, 33, gone. And then the 345 Gap, which is Glock automatic pistol. They came up with their own proprietary round. Never took off. I don't even know if I've ever seen one. Mm-mm. So the 37, 38, and 39 Glocks, gone. No more 45 Gap. And there's actually a lot more. I think this just comes down to economics. I just don't think these are models that people are buying. There's not a single, except for the Glock 34.
The 34 was the one that surprised me.
Yeah.
The rest I get, but the 34 I was a little surprised by.
I wonder if they're going to come out with some kind of replacement for it, but I don't know. Or either that, or I haven't done any like competitive shooting in years, but that 34 was super pop. It's the one I'm thinking of, right? The long slide Glock. Mm-hmm. So everybody in competition, they started using that thing. I thought it was super popular. I don't know. Did it take a nosedive, or people just not using it anymore?
No, I think it's still fairly popular. I see a fair amount out and about. I think maybe I'm not sure actually, but maybe there's other generations on the roster that are better, maybe had better triggers, like how the Gen 5s have nicer triggers than the Gen 3s for like the 19 and the 17. Maybe there's something like that. They're only discontinuing some of the gens. Perhaps there's a better generation.
I don't know.
Yeah, they're only getting rid of the 3 and the 5. They're keeping the 4.
Yeah, maybe the 4 is better, more popular.
It's interesting. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, there you go. So, goodbye, Glocks. We hardly knew ye. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to come out with a couple new models, and they're just kind of clearing the shelves and retooling the machine so they can come out with different models. So, I don't know. We'll see. Okay. This is an interesting one. Man arrested after allegedly shooting at hikers on Coles Mountain, commonly referred to as Cowles Mountain. It's actually Coles Mountain. It's kind of like Grand and Garand. It's actually Coles Mountain. Everybody calls it Cowles. It's Coles. Yep. With an unserialized gun. So a man was arrested after allegedly shooting at hikers on Coles Mountain with an unserialized gun. What are your thoughts, Dakota?
This one's interesting because I live very close to Coles Mountain, and I actually was in Dallas at TACCon, or on my way home from TACCon when this happened. But my dad was actually hiking Coles Mountain. So he saw, heard sirens and saw a bunch of police response and didn't really know what was going on until maybe the next day we had seen a report about it. But it's an interesting one because, obviously we don't have a lot of information about what actually happened. All we know is that some witnesses said they saw two people, a young man and a young woman, running down the mountain, being chased by a group of men holding rocks. That's all we know from witness statements. And that the young man who discharged the firearm stopped, shot at the, folks above him who were chasing him, and then continued running. So we don't really know what started this altercation. We have no idea of what actually happened here, aside from that one witness statement that's been made public. But an interesting piece is that almost every single thing about this was illegal.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to have a handgun as a 19-year-old man in California, and if you do have a handgun, it would have to be registered to you, which it can't be since you're not 21 years old.
Kind of.
Well,
there are very few exceptions. Mom and dad can actually gift it to you if you're between 18 and 21, right? Am I wrong about? Or 20? 18, 19, and 20, mom and dad can gift it to you.
I believe.
You can't buy it.
I believe so, but it has to get registered to you. I thought there was a clause that it still gets registered through the Department of Justice.
In any case, didn't happen here.
Right, yes.
Didn't happen here.
Yes,
so
yes.
I don't want to look at that. That's Garand and Garand right there. I'm doing it. I'm splitting hairs. Didn't happen here, but keep going.
Yeah,
It
so
was
unregistered, unserialized, didn't have a serial number, and being concealed carried without a valid concealed carry permit, and on park property, which is one of the places that you can't conceal carry, even if you do have a valid concealed carry permit. So we're looking at a lot of laws that this guy is breaking here, but he didn't care.
Was he? By the way, did he have a criminal history as well? Did we read about?
We didn't see any evidence of that. I actually couldn't find anything about the arrest, which I thought was kind of interesting. I usually can find something, but I couldn't find anything. I looked for quite a while. But he may or may not have a criminal record. We don't know. He was 19 years old. There were witnesses in between the two parties, and so that's where we have all the information from, was the family that was hiking between the shooter and his girlfriend and the crowd of men chasing them with rocks.
So it's not legal for him to buy it. It's not legal for him to make it. It's not legal for him to carry it. It's not legal for him to shoot it at people. It's not legal for it to have him where he had it. What's the lesson learned? What do we... that sounds like a huge disaster. So why is this an important thing to talk about?
Criminals don't care. The criminals are going to crime. That is what is going to happen, right? So, I hike Coles fairly regularly, and I'm not allowed to carry a gun, and I'm a law-abiding citizen. And I could have very easily been on the mountain that day with my dad. If I hadn't been in Texas, I probably would have been. And so, we think about all of these laws that they make to make it more challenging for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. But here we have an example of these laws not working at all. There were so many laws broken here, and there's not... there's not a path in which I don't think that this guy is going to, actually be charged and get put away for a long time. I don't think that's in the future here. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
So let me ask you this. Is Coles Mountain, is that a dangerous, crime-ridden area?
No, not at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
is
it's
the surrounding
very safe
area? Yeah, very
neighborhood.
safe.
Yeah.
If you were hiking that day at that time, would you have been carrying?
No, I would not have.
Why not?
Because it's illegal for me to do so. Yeah.
So does that law make you a whole bunch safer that you can't carry and defend yourself?
Not at all.
Not at all.
It actually makes me less safe. And one thing that's interesting, aside just from not being able to conceal carry in parks, is that the city of San Diego park property city has an ordinance that actually says not only, aside from the state stuff about parks, the City of San Diego ordinance says that you cannot discharge a firearm within a park property unless you are a law enforcement officer or you work for the zoo and you are using the firearm to do your job. So there's not even an exception. Like some places will see an exception of like, if you did carry a gun here, and even though it wasn't quite right, if you use it in self-defense, you won't be charged with that crime. But in San Diego, it's very specific that it is a crime to discharge a firearm. There's no self-defense clause there.
In the city regulations.
Ordinance, yeah.
So, I got to tell you, it's just absolutely ridiculous that we have to put up with this stuff.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. But I think it's very clear if you look at the folks who were being shot at, and you look at the guy who was doing the shooting, the two sides, like we're obviously hyper focused on the people who were being shot at. That's who we can relate to. But then the anti-gun side are hyper focused on, well, look at the guy that did the shooting. And there's this chasm between the two. I wish that we could get together and show, like, look, we're arguing right past each other, We don't want criminals to have guns. We didn't want this guy to break all these laws and shoot people. That's not our goal, So when they think of gun owners, they think of this guy with a ghost gun who shot at people. Mm-hmm. When we think of gun owners, we think of these poor people that are trying to, live life and pay taxes and raise families and do the law-abiding thing. We're thinking about folks that want to carry for self-defense, and it's just really difficult to have a conversation.
Well, and I think about it too from the perspective of if I was on the mountain and a group of men started chasing me with rocks, like that's also a problem. We don't know the story, which is why I kind of said, we don't know what really happened here. But obviously, if I needed to defend my life, I would want to have the legal right to do that in that place. So I don't understand the push. Obviously, I don't understand the push to make certain places, illegal to carry as a law-abiding citizen because, as we'll kind of talk about in a little bit, I think that concealed carry study that shows that, concealed carriers tend to only stop mass shooters in places where it was legal to carry a gun. There's much less or, far fewer instances where a law-abiding concealed carrier stopped a mass shooter in a gun-free zone because, in general, we want to follow the laws.
Well, let's talk about that right now, actually. So there was a report. We talked about it briefly last week. We're going to continue to talk about it because there's a lot of good information. John Lott Jr., he's the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. He served as senior advisor for research and statistics in the Office of Justice Programs and the Office of Legal Policy and the Justice Department. I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times and seeing him speak and give a talk, and I just wanted to touch on his background. He was actually a professor, and he was asked, his background is in economics, and when people think economics, they immediately think of money, but economics is actually much broader than that. So, and it has to do with statistics and, that sort of thing. So he was asked to give use his economics background and give a talk about crime statistics. And at the time, he was completely and totally neutral. He hadn't done any research. He didn't really have a strong opinion. So he started doing what an economist does, and he started looking for numbers. Well, he found out that the numbers, when it comes to crime statistics, were complete junk. They were completely bogus, and they weren't useful in any way. That there were a lot of misconceptions, and that some of the definitions that the FBI used were completely and totally misleading. For example, you've heard that you're more likely to have a gun used against you by someone you're in a relationship with. Well, when you and I think about that, we think about you're someone you're dating or someone you're married to. But the reality is the FBI definition, a relationship, is extremely broad. If you get into a taxi cab and you pay a guy, $5 to take you 2 blocks, and that taxi cab driver, and then you rob the taxi cab driver. Well, you guys had an economic relationship, according to the FBI. So he decided, hey, you know what? I really need to use my expertise, and I really need to, crunch these numbers in a more effective and realistic way, which led to the book More Guns, Less Crime. He discovered that the more legally owned guns you have in an area, the fewer instances of crime that you have. So this latest piece that he put out is study concealed carriers do a better job of stopping active shooters than police. So we're going to talk a little bit more. So you were talking, go ahead, talk about what you were just talking about there.
Yeah, no, just the idea that if you are a law-abiding citizen and you are not carrying a gun in a place that you typically would if it was legal to do so, you're choosing not to carry a gun in that place because it's not legal. The police are most likely to stop the active shooter, or the active shooter is most likely to stop themselves, either by, committing suicide or by running out of ammunition. So
if you're in a school, like this is an example, there's some kind of mass shooting or mass murder with a gun in a school, it's far more likely that the police are going to stop the murderer in that situation.
Yeah, or the murderer is going to stop himself.
Or he's going to off himself.
Yes.
Because you can't carry there.
Right.
You can't carry there. Now, if you're in a you're in a different situation, that's not a quote unquote sensitive area where self-defense is banned, and you're carrying, then it's far more likely that the shooter will be stopped by a licensed carrier, someone that's legally carrying, as opposed to him offing himself or cops, right?
Yes, and when we're thinking about citizens who have a firearm there, they have a much faster response time. So we see much lower deaths or, lower numbers of people gravely injured in these mass shooting events, because in that particular event, the armed citizen was already there and they stopped it within, a minute or 2 minutes, which is much faster than putting in the 911 call, stopping yourself from screaming long enough to tell the dispatcher where you are, right? Like there's all these things that have to happen perfectly for police to even get on the way to an active shooter event. So we're looking at like 7+ minutes in a lot of these cases for the first officer to arrive. So if we're thinking about, what would we want if we were there? We would want somebody with a gun there right now trying to stop that bad guy. And so the armed citizen obviously has a much better chance of being there at the time.
Yeah, and some of these defense users, like I interviewed the guy who was was a concealed carrier in a church, and somebody walked. This is down in Texas. Somebody walked in with a shotgun, and this guy using it was 357 SIG. Made a headshot at like 20 or 25 feet. Like it was absolutely insane, the accuracy under the pressure he was under, and he stopped people from dying. We all heard about Williford, who heard a church that was getting shot up by somebody that legally couldn't own firearms, and he grabbed his AR and went and stopped that shooting. Over and over and over again. There was a guy in a mall, who stopped the shooting. I mean, over and over and over again, the idea that, hey, you're not going to be able to stop somebody, if you have just a carry permit, you're not going to be able to stop somebody who's in some kind of mass shooting situation has been, that myth has been blown completely out of the water. It happens all the time, and effectively. A guy with a pistol up against a guy with a shotgun. You've seen people with pistols up against people with rifles. I mean, it happens all the time.
So, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I would just say the quickest response is going to be the person that's there.
Yes.
Right.
And that's what they're preventing. They're trying to prevent us from being there.
Exactly. And yeah, but if you can't be there because you've banned, someone who's sane, trained, and law-abiding from being able to be there, then of course, bad things are going to continue to happen.
Law enforcement can only respond. They're not going to be there.
Yeah, and I think last time we kind of talked a little bit about the FBI reporting, under-reporting so many of these cases. So, in 2014 to 2023, the FBI statistics said that armed citizens only stopped 14 of the 350 active shooter incidents that it had identified. And so when you think about that, you're like, oh, that's a tiny, tiny percentage. But the CPRC actually found that the total was 515 active shooter incidents, so more than that 350, and that armed citizens had stopped 180 of them. So the FBI said in the same time period, 14 good guys with guns stopped bad guys. And in the CPRC study, they found 180 good guys had stopped bad guys with guns. So huge discrepancies there. And I just kind of wanted to talk about a couple of them because I think it's important that we highlight the people and the situations that are creating this, situation to happen, right? So we've got a bad guy who is a 22-year-old man. This was in Texas, or in Florida, sorry. He grabbed a short-barreled rifle from his car and he threatened to start firing into the crowd. People confronted him, but he didn't drop the gun, and a 32-year-old man with a CCW fired his own weapon and struck the young man. First responders pronounced the younger man dead at the scene. That could have been the next Pulse.
Horrible, yeah.
That could have
horribly
been
tragic.
That could have been dozens of deaths. And I want to say probably not many of us listening right now had ever heard that story.
No.
Right? That's not something anybody really talks about. That was just 2 or 3 years ago. I think that was in 2022. We've got another one from that same kind of time period where an Arizona man, was at a party and somebody came in and started shooting people. And the man had actually been shot in the head at this 4th of July party.
We've talked to him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not only did we talk to him, he was the guest speaker at Gun Prom a couple years ago.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, he's great. Well, what's his name?
Raul?
Raul, yeah.
Yeah, Raul Mendez.
Barely had any training.
Yeah.
And was still, and was, I mean, critically wounded, I think is probably accurate to say. And he still fought back and saved his life, saved his family's life.
Yeah, and his family was there. He had 2 daughters and a pregnant wife. And, this could have been the type of tragedy. There were 30 people gathered at the party. This could have been the type of tragedy we hear about of, a dozen, 2 dozen, 30 people shot at this, horrible event. And instead, we hardly heard about it. I mean, he did get a little bit more press, I think, than the Florida one. Maybe because we live so close to Arizona. I know we had kind of heard about this one a little bit more, and I've seen him on a lot of interviews and stuff.
Good guy. He's now very well trained. He's an NRA instructor, and I want to say it affected his eye. I believe.
Yes.
He lost an eye. He lost an eye.
Yeah.
He's got a really cool glass one though. He puts like a the pupil and the iris. It's a casing.
Bullet. Yeah, it's
casing.
the bottom of a casing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Let's talk about the sensitive area thing for a while because there's an interesting thing that's happening. They're basically places like Firearms Policy Coalition are filing lawsuits to attack the idea of having these sensitive areas where self-defense is banned and you can't carry. The interesting thing that's happening is they're questioning, why is it a sensitive area? Like, what about it? Define what makes an area sensitive. You just don't want guns there, And they're pointing out, like, for example, post offices are sensitive areas where self-defense is banned. And they're questioning, well, wait a minute, what makes this a sensitive area? All you have is, Amazon packages or whatever. You know what I mean? All you have is envelopes. The other thing is there's no security.
Right.
You're not disarming anybody. You're not there defending anybody. There's no metal detector. It's not secure. It's not sensitive in any way. So why are we just automatically referring to this as a sensitive area? And they're putting the burden on the government to, hey, prove to us why you're banning our rights in this area. And it has to be far more substantial than just, well, gee, we think guns are bad,
Well, and if I'm going to be compelled to take my gun off and not have the means to defend myself if I need to, then I want to feel confident that the organization that is running that event or the location that I'm going to has armed security that is willing and capable and ready to defend my life on my behalf. So, I think about things like Petco Park, right? You go to the stadium, at least you see a police presence, there's snipers in the towers, you feel like, all right, if something crazy started happening, at least there are people here with that particular job. There's a pretty low probability that people are getting through the metal detectors with firearms on, so I feel at least like they've done a little bit of due diligence here to try to ensure my safety. But someplace like a neighborhood park or the post office or a school with no metal detectors, no armed security, no one there is ready and willing to protect my life if the bell rings or whatever they say, right? So that's the thing that is challenging for me to stomach is not only are you telling me that I have to remove my firearm and give away the only option I have to protect myself from a stronger violent offender, but you're also not paying somebody to do that on my behalf if it became required.
You know, it was interesting. I went to the ER. I took a friend to the ER, or someone was actually, she was having severe headaches, and I dropped her off at the ER, and I went and parked, you know, and she was already in, you know, seeing the doctor. And I went in, and security wanded me. And I told the guy, I said, you know, hey, I got a permit. This was a few years ago. It was right after I got a permit. And he said, oh, are you on duty? Do you have a badge? You know, and I was like, no, I'm not a cop. I have, you know, he hadn't seen it. There weren't a lot of CCWs issued, you know, at that time.
Yeah.
So I said, no, I have a carry permit. You know, it's on me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And the guy said, okay, wait here. You know, I don't really know what to do. Hold on.
Yeah.
So he went and got his boss, which is fine. And the boss came over, super cool. He said, hey, you know, we have lockers. You can disarm. You put it in the locker, or you can just go put it back in your vehicle. I said, okay, no problem. I'm going to go back and put it in my vehicle. I'd prefer. So I went and disarmed in the parking lot, put it in my vehicle, lock container, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then I went back in and, you know, we went, saw the doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm sitting out in the waiting room, and I looked at these two guys. Neither one of them were armed.
Yeah.
And I'm going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's got to be one of us, you know?
Right.
If it's you or me, I kind of don't care. I'd prefer me, but it can't be both of us. We can't both be disarmed. That's not safer. That's
100%.
not better. But I thought it was really interesting. And I walked into, you know, an emergency room where the property decided it was a sensitive area and said, hey, I got a gun. And they said, okay, wait right here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they had no idea what to do, which is fine, education, okay. But the fact that, you know, there was no plan. Like, what
Right.
were they going to do? There was nothing, you know, if someone has a gun, someone comes in with a gun, law-abiding, not law-abiding, you know, what were they going to do? They just had a wand to, you know, figure out that I had a gun. That is not security.
Well, and I can almost guarantee you their active shooter response plan was run, hide, fight.
Yeah, well,
That-
for the security guards?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is not security.
They were gonna try to save their own life. They had absolutely no plan to save your life or the life of anyone else in that ER.
And they couldn't. They didn't have the tools. And
Right.
that's virtue signaling. That's so
Yes.
people feel better. They feel better about things, but it's not the reality.
So what's interesting is the Ninth Circuit, and they're ruling back in September, stated we can carry in healthcare facilities.
Yeah.
But hospitals, I'm not sure if you've heard this, but I've been told by quite a few doctors, physicians, and nurses that have come through CCW courses that they are now requiring by next year all hospitals have every entry point, a security, metal detectors or security, checking everybody.
Well, I'll tell you a secret real quick. Kaiser Hospital down in Claremont area, if you go through the ER, they have metal detectors.
Right.
You know, so just go through the front door. There's nothing, and then
But next year that'll be changed.
and you're like 50 feet away. Well, that'll be interesting. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not sure what I'm going to do if I can't defend myself in a doctor's office. Like if they decide to ban my self-defense, you're kind of stuck. I mean, in all honesty, I'm a big proponent of, you know, private property rights.
Yeah.
And it's their property, so
Right.
they can decide whether or not they want to let me on. But I'm kind of stuck. I can't go. You know, I can't go find another healthcare provider, to be perfectly frank.
Well,
So-
and I think if as law-abiding concealed carriers, if we don't accept that as the status quo, you know, unarmed security protecting my life for me, if we all say, hey, we understand that you're not going to let us carry a gun, but we're going to really adamantly tell you that we will, you know, be way more comfortable with this ruling if you have armed security, if you have, you know, whatever they need to have people with guns there protecting us. I think that could change policy, right? They don't want to lose money. And hiring a couple security guards is not the solution here, obviously, but it could be a step in the right direction.
Well, I think there's a legit thought that Well, like I said, if it's both of us, if they're just there to disarm me and they are disarmed, unacceptable.
Right.
Absolutely ridiculous, and we should probably be loud.
Fight back
about it.
against that. Yeah.
But, maybe there's less of a case to make, if they're saying, hey, look, we got armed security, whatever. I don't know. Maybe there's less of a case. It doesn't mean we have to like it.
Yeah.
But I can tell you it's unacceptable to go into a place where they're disarming you and they are disarmed. So anyway, we're going to talk more about that study in coming weeks. I think there's still a lot more to pick apart. I think there's still a lot more discussion to have. But there you go. That's the study. Check it out. Look it up. Check it out for yourself. It's John Lott study. Concealed carriers do a better job of stopping active shooters than the police. So a few months ago, one of the county board of supervisors members, Nora Vargas, stepped down. She won re-election and then immediately stepped down, which we're still not sure why. There's a lot of rumors swirling, but in the world of politics, man, that we've already moved on to bigger and better stories. There was a special election, and this was basically a primary. Nobody won. We have the top two vote getters that now face off in July. So there were a number of Democrats that ran, and there was a Republican who ran, John McCann, who's the mayor of Chula Vista. Now, McCann secured just about 43.5% of the vote. And then the next leader was Imperial Beach Mayor Paloma Aguirre, and she received about 32%. And everybody else falls by the wayside now. They don't matter anymore. So it's 43.5 or so to 32%. And then they're going to go for the runoff. I wanted to talk about this race. San Diego County Gunners didn't weigh in on this race. And the reason we didn't weigh in on this race is that nobody in this race deserves your vote. It's kind of interesting. There's a couple of things that are very interesting about this. Aguirre actually received the anti-gun folks in San Diego received their endorsement. Now, this is interesting, and it's proof positive of what I've been saying. They're not actually dedicated to the idea of being anti-gun. Okay, what they are is they are Democrats who use the gun issue, use your Second Amendment rights to try to get more Democrats endorsed and in office. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Aguirre is not pro-gun. Don't get me wrong. But between the two, between McCann and Aguirre, there's every reason in the world that they should have endorsed McCann, except for the fact that he's a Republican. McCann has actually voted for gun bans. He's voted for magazine bans. He's voted to expand gun violence restraining orders. He's basically checked off everything on the list that the anti-gunners like. Whereas Aguirre hasn't done any of that, and in fact, when she is currently the mayor of Imperial Beach, she actually helped get a gun shop open in Imperial Beach. So you have a Democrat that they endorsed who's helped a gun shop open, and a Republican that they refuse to endorse who has voted for extremely restrictive gun laws. Doesn't make any sense. I actually saw that the anti-gunners were at this march last week where it was just purely an anti-gun march, or excuse me, an anti-Trump march. It had nothing to do with guns. There was nothing in there that as far as the priorities and what their stated purpose was, nothing in these marches had anything to do with Second Amendment, had anything to do with their agenda, had everything to do with Democrat talking points when it comes to economics and just generally being anti-Trump. Still, they, as a gun group, showed up. Doesn't make any sense at all. Need to understand their motivation. The anti-gunners in San Diego are not anti-gun as much as they are simply pro-Democrat. San Diego County Gunners isn't like that. We're extremely nonpartisan. In fact, we're viciously nonpartisan. If you are pro-Second Amendment, we will support you. It doesn't matter what party you belong to. If you're a viable candidate and you're doing the things that you need to do to get elected and you're pro-Second Amendment, we'll support you. The other side of that is if you're anti-gun, we will absolutely not support you. So let's talk about John McCann. John McCann is somebody who is a Republican. They're the mayor of Chula Vista. He's the mayor of Chula Vista and is 100% absolutely anti-Second Amendment. That's not my opinion. That's actually his voting record. Okay, it's not something that he's stated or relayed to us. It's not some interpretation I'm making. I'm looking at his voting record on the Chula Vista City Council. In August of 2019, John McCann voted for a gun ban, a magazine ban, and an expansion of gun violence restraining orders. He did this after telling me he was going to vote against it. So he actually came to me personally at a Republican meeting and said, hey, I'm going to vote against this, but I don't think we have 3 votes. He said, I'm going to vote against it. Another Republican is going to vote against it. I don't think I have a 3rd vote to make this thing pass. So I went to a Democrat, Jill Galvez, and said, hey, here's why this thing doesn't make any sense. Here's why it's bad. I know you and I have talked before, Jill Galvez, and you are generally pro Second Amendment. Her concern was, I don't want this thing to get out of hand, and I don't want this to be made a big deal. It really shouldn't be a city issue anyway, which I agree with her on. It shouldn't be a city issue. So I promised, hey, you know what? We got your back. Don't worry. It's going to pass. Everything will be okay. We'll cover for you. We won't show up with 100 people and make a big deal out of it, but we appreciate your vote. She said, great, let's do it. So the other Republican voted against it. She voted against it, and John McCann didn't. He voted for it. He voted for it, completely ruining the relationship or any credibility I had with Jill Galvez, and effectively, saying, "Hey, I am all for gun restrictions." It doesn't get any clearer than that, and it's not like it was some kind of minor issue. This was a gun ban he was voting for. It was gun violence restraining orders that he was voting for. It was for a magazine ban that he was voting for. These are definitive issues when it comes to Second Amendment. Now, I got to tell you, I hear a lot from people who say, oh, but Mike, gee, golly gosh, this guy's a Republican. We got to elect a Republican majority on the county board of supervisors. And you know what? Second Amendment's not my primary issue anyway. Okay, well, let's analyze that. So let's talk about John McCann's character first, right off the bat. Now, I already told you he lied to me and backstabbed all gun owners and completely ruined a relationship, and my word, with another elected official. I'd say that's a fairly significant stab at his character. There have also been stories of him just walking off the dais rather than voting for something controversial. But I want to go back to November of 2014. John McCann was actually busted by NBC News. They interviewed him after an argument he had with another activist, or with an activist. He was actually an elected official at the time. The activist wasn't some left-wing lunatic. The activist was actually a conservative or fairly right-of-center activist, and they were talking outside of a restaurant. And John McCann got so mad at this guy that he actually threw a rock at him. And when questioned by NBC News, they said, hey, you threw a rock. He goes, oh, no, I didn't throw a rock. That's not true. They showed him the security footage that he didn't know existed. But there was actually a security camera that caught him throwing a rock. And he stammered and lied and was all over the place. Eventually, he settled that, no, he wasn't picking up a rock and throwing it. He had dropped his cell phone, and he was picking up his cell phone. Well, I want to show, we actually got the video, the security camera video of John McCann, and I wanted to show his version of picking up a cell phone and trying to state, oh, no, I wasn't throwing a rock. Well, let's watch him Trevor Hoffman this thing at this guy's vehicle.
I never threw anything at the truck. I was carrying a phone. I was on the phone, and I think I may have dropped my phone. So I did not throw anything at his truck.
Today, a day after interviewing him, we showed him the video, but he did not want to go on camera as he watched it. Today, he said he didn't remember throwing anything at the truck.
That video clearly shows John McCann picking up a rock and throwing it at an activist. And then he went on again to lie to NBC and say, oh, no, that's not what I was doing. So as far as character, you cannot rely on John McCann I mean, there's just no reason to believe that this guy is good when it comes to his word. He certainly can't control his temper. So what about taxes? That's something that's really important to Republicans. You know, that's another issue that, hey, I want to vote for a Republican. And, you know, taxes are very, very important. Just last year, he helped pass Measure P in Chula Vista. Chula Vista. It's a sales tax increase in Chula Vista. And I don't mean that he, you know, voted for it himself. I mean, he actually wrote an op-ed saying, hey, we need to increase your taxes. Now, if you read the op-ed, it's, you know, it's kind of mealy-mouthed and he kind of dances around it. And he actually refers to this tax hike as special. It's a very special tax hike. And he said that if it passes, this is another interesting quote, if it passes, if this tax hike passes, that Chula Vista won't have to raise taxes. Okay, so if you guys vote for a tax increase, then we won't have to increase taxes because of your tax increase. It's absolutely ridiculous. The idea that he is going to defend the Republican stance of being anti-tax there's no reason to believe this. This is one example, and it's recent. This didn't happen 10 years ago. This happened last year. This just happened. So what about COVID? I got to tell you, I see a lot of people that are supporting McCann, and their entire personality, their entire political awakening happened due to COVID. So how was McCann on COVID? Well, in April of 2020, right after COVID started, McCann publicly supported the shutdown that was supposed to be only 2 weeks, but of course extended well beyond that. He posted about social distancing and closing businesses and public areas like parks. And he also warned that Chula Vista cops, park rangers, and public works staff would enforce this law. There's no pretending that he wasn't absolutely in favor of and supporting all these shutdowns that some of the folks that were activated by COVID were against. And not only that, but he basically warned everybody publicly, hey, look, we're going to get cops and other city staff to enforce this. He backed masks publicly. He backed the stay-at-home orders that went well beyond 2 weeks publicly. And he backed bans on family gatherings. This is an actual public statement that he made in May of 2020. He publicly stated that it's disrespectful, quote unquote, to others when you don't wear a mask, and further supported bans on gatherings, groups, and specifically mentioned picnics. He basically warned that, hey, if you're out there with your friends and loved ones having a picnic, that we're going to send cops or park rangers after you. In no way was he in line with what Republicans generally were trying to accomplish when it comes to pushing back on COVID. It doesn't make any sense to me. And again, this isn't my interpretation. These are all public statements. So what about illegal immigration? That's another big hot button item when it comes to Republicans. Well, in an interview in November 2022, McCann was actually interviewed by BorderReport.com, and he said, quote, some supporters of Republican, actually he didn't say this. This was the article, but then there's a quote in here. So the article reads, some supporters of Republican mayoral candidate John McCann want him to change the welcoming status if he's elected, the welcoming status of Chula Vista. That's something he says won't happen. He says, I supported the welcoming city, said McCann, a longtime Chula Vista city councilman and Iraq war veteran. Chula Vista is the center of the San Diego-Tijuana economic region. I believe this relationship makes us a leader and will bring more jobs to Chula Vista. So this welcoming status, well, what's a welcoming city versus a sanctuary city? So I looked it up, and there's really no difference. A sanctuary city and a welcoming city are basically the same thing. It said here, well, often used interchangeably, welcoming city and sanctuary city differ only in focus. Sanctuary city policies primarily aim to limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities, while welcoming city invites focus on creating inclusive and supportive environments for all residents, including immigrants. Of course, what is meant there is illegal immigrants. Which, by the way, he refused to say in the interview. He refused to call them illegal immigrants, which is not very Republican of him. He actually told the Union Tribune that he wanted to protect the undocumented. So as far as immigration goes, he supports his version of a sanctuary city in Chula Vista. He says that the illegal immigrants will create jobs, and that he wants to protect them and refer to them as undocumented. If you're a Republican and you're in line with what they believe as far as illegal immigration, and you're hiring him to work on the County Board of Supervisors to protect what you think illegal immigration should be, you're sadly mistaken. It's not going to happen with John McCann. In no way is he in line with what Republicans believe. So what about environmentalism? That's another big one. Well, McCann has many times described himself as an environmentalist, and he actually listed it as a top priority. He's publicly backed fairly extreme, quote-unquote, climate change measures for Chula Vista, including their climate action plan. So it's climate change and fighting back against climate change or something that he has stated is very important to him, and has actually included some pretty extreme measures in Chula Vista's climate action plan, which again he backs. No reason to believe that if you think that environmentalism, at least democratic flavor of environmentalism, has gone extreme, there's no reason to believe that McCann is anything other than in line with what extremism is when it comes to environmentalism. So what about abortion? There's another hot button topic that Republicans tend to be pro-life. In fact, I think they're overwhelmingly pro-life. He's very vocal about being pro-choice, and he told the Union Tribune this on 2022. He said that he absolutely was pro-choice. He didn't mince words. He didn't, he wasn't mealy-mouthed about that. He's mealy-mouthed about so many other things, like the Second Amendment and, immigration and whatnot. But he was absolutely positive that he's pro-choice when it comes to abortion. I think some people are sadly mistaken when it comes to John McCann. And in no way should he be rewarded with higher office. Now, he came very close when it comes to the election. But, there's another election, and then winner takes all. There's no reason that you should offer him your vote. There's no reason you should donate to him. There's no reason he should be rewarded with higher office. No matter what, even if we have a majority Republicans and you like that idea that, hey, this is going to be the third Republican on the county board, it doesn't matter if none of his stances have to do with Republican policy. If he can't be trusted, if he's throwing rocks at activists and then lying about it. This guy's bad news. I understand that people are excited, Republicans are excited about getting him elected. But the reality is, if you vet this guy, if you scratch the surface just a little bit, he's not going to vote your way on abortion, on environmentalism, on illegal immigration, on COVID. He certainly didn't vote the right way, on taxes, and not on the Second Amendment. This isn't, a tiny little percentage. This is a big deal. He's not just kind of moderate or in a squishy area. He has backed some of the most extreme left-wing ideas when it comes to a lot of these issues. But the reality is he's proven time and time again that he cannot be trusted. He's going to tell you one thing and do another. He's got no backbone. He's not going to stand up and do anything controversial. He's going to put his finger in the air and see which way the wind is blowing. And I'm telling you right now, nobody in that race, neither person in that race is worth voting for. Don't give them something as precious as your vote. Certainly don't give them your time or your money. Now, I don't blame the Republican Party. They have to endorse the Republican in the race. I get it. And I blame the voters who got him to where he is on the city council and then mayor of Chula Vista. I blame people who don't do this level of vetting and find out, hey, he's a Republican, but does he actually believe in what I believe? Does he actually have any ounce of character? So please, don't vote for John McCann. Gun owners, we're not endorsing him. San Diego County Gun Owners is not endorsing him. We're not endorsing anybody in that race. Stay home. It's not going to help. Get him in that seat, and you're just going to be stabbed in the back rather than the front. So which is more dangerous? So there you go. Okay, we're going to talk to our next guest who needs no intro. He's been on the show a few times, Carl Deio. He's the founder and chairman of Reform California, and he is the California Assembly member who represents East County in San Diego as of last November. We're very, very proud and happy to have him on the show. He's been a longtime supporter of San Diego County gun owners and Gun Owners Radio, and today we're going to talk to him about a big announcement. But first, Carl, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm up in the Sacramento swamp, and it's corrupt. Yeah. These people are completely batshit crazy. And we're working hard to shine a light and bring the people's voice into that chamber, that broken system. And I think they are getting very frustrated, but the voice is being heard. And that's the first step in us turning California around, is we have to bring the voice of the people, an alternative point of view, into the process. And we're making sure that voice is heard loud and clear. They don't like it, but they're going to hear it.
And we hear kind of generalities about how crazy and horrible and stupid and out of touch Sacramento is. But talk to us about, it's been a couple months since you've been up there full time as an assembly member. Specifically, what do you think it is, or what's an example of just how out of touch they are? Why is it so disconnected?
Oh, golly. So the system serves the very special interests, the wealthy, people who have the ability to give campaign contributions, to write big checks, to advance the political careers of these politicians. And that means that it's the labor unions, the lobbyists, the corporations. These groups are absolutely in charge. They call the shots. And a lot of these legislators are only interested in what their next political job is, not doing the current job they're in, faithfully representing their constituents, but rather, how do I keep the special interests happy so that I can climb the ladder of California politics? Sadly, that is the case on both sides of the aisle. And that's why Reform California exists as a movement. That's why people on the right, there are some politicians, Republican politicians and Republican political consultants, who hate us. They hate what we stand for, because what we say is that both political parties have betrayed us, have failed us in California in particular, just as they have in Washington. And that when we elect Republicans in California to the handful of seats that we have to demand that they're going to be fighters. And that they're not going to succumb to the pleasures of the office, the money that's offered them, the jobs, frankly, employment opportunities that are offered to them, and that they do the right thing. And we've been absolutely turning the tide within the Republican caucus. And as a result of that, the Republicans are much more aggressive in Sacramento now since I've gotten there. And they are getting their message across as a result. And that meant that we had to really push back against certain Republicans inside in order for them to hold the line. And that's been happening.
Well, I appreciate very much that you continue to understand your job in Sacramento, which I got to tell you, I talk to people all the time, talk to candidates, I talk to, whatever, all the time. And when they're going up to Sacramento, you frequently hear how they're going to change the world. They're going to offer this bill or fight against that bill or whatever. That's all well and good, but Republicans are in such small minority. Their number one job right now is to get other people elected who agree with them. Now, you had a radio show here in San Diego, which of course you still do on the internet, on your channel. You created Reform California. You could have easily done that, raised your name ID, gotten elected to the assembly, and left that all behind, like most people do. But you understand and continue to fight for other people who are like-minded to get elected. You, in essence, have, 2 full-time jobs. And I really, truly appreciate that about you, and the fact that you understand that. What's it look like as far as, being the mega minority in Sacramento?
I'm having a lot of fun because, yes, in terms of counting votes, we are a super minority. But on the issues, we are representing the supermajority voice in California. You saw that with Prop 36, the Make Crime Illegal Again initiative in 2024, overwhelmingly passed, even passed in San Francisco, for God's sakes. That you got a good idea that when even San Francisco voters are willing to go along with it. And so now we're moving forward on popular ideas like ending the sanctuary state, cutting off welfare from illegal immigrants, making sure that we have voter ID to restore the integrity and public trust and confidence in our elections. These are issues that have 70% support. And so those are the issues that I'm fighting for in Sacramento. And while the Democrats may have the votes, we've got the voice and we've got the people with us. And I'm not afraid of that position. I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to cower. I'm not going to, capitulate. They're used to their Republicans going along to get along, and they don't know what to do with our movement because we're not willing to back down and be quiet. And we're now flipping seats, and we continue, and we have a plan to continue to flip seats in Sacramento in the 2026 election and put our ideas on the ballot using ballot initiatives.
And that's awesome. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. You have a big announcement about somebody, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But before we do, what's the Second Amendment reality up in Sacramento? What have you learned about the Second Amendment reality in Sacramento since you've been there?
First, I wish that legislators on both sides of the aisle would actually understand what the Second Amendment is. They don't. Guns are scary. Guns are bad. So are criminals. That's why you have a gun. It's why you have the Second Amendment right of self-defense. I start out with people when I talk about the Second Amendment, I say it's not about guns. Guns are the instrument. The Second Amendment is the human right of self-defense, a basic human right. That's what the Bill of Rights is all about. It's the basic suite of human rights that we are afforded by our Creator, by our birthright, and that no government gives us. We have those inherently. Just by, saying hello, we have these rights, not government giving it to us. And that the right of self-defense is fundamental. And that a gun is merely the instrument by which we exercise our right of self-defense. Democrats don't seem to understand that. And then they don't really have any interest in the facts. I mean, I'll sit down and say, what you're hearing from the Brady group it's lie. It's a lie. It's just flat out wrong. And they don't even want to hear about facts. For them, it's all about emotion, misinformation, the narrative that they're driving. And it's really sad that they're not interested in an informed discussion. So we do show up with our facts in support of the Second Amendment. To dispel the lies, the falsehoods that the gun grabbing community has been peddling. And then we basically make the argument on the constitutional level that whether you agree or disagree with our facts, the reality is it's not your decision. These are constitutional rights that you're trying to infringe upon. But unfortunately, they hear those arguments and they continue to pass these bills. So every cycle, we have to play defense. The idea that we're going to be able to pass Pro 2A legislation in Sacramento right now, that's a fantasy. Some bills might get heard in committee. Like there's one bill that's really good that would extend the amount of time that your CCW is valid for.
Yeah.
I think right now the rule is every 2 years they have to be reviewed.
Yep.
Why don't we take the burden off of the sheriffs and do that every 5 years or every 6 years? That's a common sense reform. These are people who already have CCWs. They've already gone through the process. Why are we diverting law enforcement resources to validate that someone's a good actor? Why don't we do that every 5 years instead of every 2? And again, you and I know that that's a common sense thing, but no. They're likely not going to go for that common sense bill because they just hate the Second Amendment. They hate the idea of people having guns to defend themselves.
Well, let's hope. And you've always been a supporter of San Diego County gun owners. You've always been a supporter of the Second Amendment. You've never asked for anything in return, and I don't think that can be said enough. Truly appreciate it. From day one, for our 9.5 or whatever your history now, you've always stepped up and said, hey, I have an idea. Here's what I want to do for you. And you've never asked for anything in return. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Okay, so there is a special election that is coming up now in the assembly, and the seat is mostly, if not entirely, in Riverside. Talk about that.
Sure, my good friend Bill Asaley who's been an amazing reformer, a partner of our Reform California movement for many years. He represented the 63rd District in the California State Assembly, which is in Riverside. It's in the area of Corona. And he got appointed by President Trump to be the Assistant U.S. Attorney for Central California, which is 20 million residents in L.A., Orange County, Riverside. It's a big, big role. And he's already hit the ground running. He's investigating Gavin Newsom and Democrats, state and local, for their corruption. Love what he's doing after just the first week in office. However, that appointment means that his state assembly seat now has to be filled. And so we cannot take for granted that this is a Republican seat. We have to, in special elections, work real hard to make sure we win these special election seats.
And get the right Republican. We got to get the right Republican in that
Republican.
seat.
Someone who's going to be a reliable constitutional conservative, someone who's going to fight, who's going to work hard. And so I'm very pleased to announce that I'm endorsing Lake Elsinore Councilwoman Natasha Johnson, who I believe will fill Bill Assaley's shoes, will do a great job as a constitutional conservative in the state assembly. And I'm urging everyone to get behind her candidacy and help her in this important special election. The date of the special election will be called any day now. But we expect it's probably going to be around June. And so Natasha is going to need your contributions, your volunteer time, your support to make sure that she wins that seat and joins me in Sacramento in the fight to restore a little sanity inside the state legislature.
Nice. And that, I got to tell you, endorsements from reform, not an easy task. People really have to prove themselves to Reform California in order to get an endorsement. And like you said, that's an extremely important seat. Whoever gets there is going to be replacing somebody that was extremely active. Tell us a couple of things that you like about Natasha and why you think voters will like her as well.
Well, again, she's a constitutional conservative. On her voting record, she's for the Second Amendment. These are not issues that I consider to be negotiable. Secondly, she's a fighter. She doesn't want to just be a seat warmer. She wants to go to Sacramento because she knows she's going to be in the super minority, but she wants to help elect other Republicans. She wants to be a fighter and speak out on these issues. And third, she's been a very thoughtful local elected official, really concerned about quality of life issues. I always tell Republicans, not only do I need your vote, I need your care and feeding for your district. If you don't take care of your district, you're going to lose it at some point. Your job is to serve. Your job is to solve problems for people who, they shouldn't have to figure out how to navigate government. So Natasha's record has been one of always being very responsive to her constituents. And so for all three of those reasons, I'm proud to endorse her. We got to get her across the finish line, get this seat nailed down so that we can continue to push back and hopefully end the Democrat supermajority in the 2026 election with the candidates that we're teeing up.
Great. Okay, so Inland Empire gun owners, you have your marching orders. Everyone else, even if you don't live anywhere near that district, you can still donate. It'll definitely help. So great, Carl. Thank you so much. This is awesome news. Appreciate everything you do. Anything else you want our listeners to know?
Just, in the fight for freedom in California, it really boils down to the 2026 election. I believe that this is going to be a good election for us, but we need everyone off the sidelines and into the fight. We have our top ballot measure priority is voter ID. So if you want to help us get voter ID on the ballot, I need 1 million signatures. Go to voteridpetition.org. Sign up there at voteridpetition.org. And we're going to get that reform enacted in the 2026 election as well.
Thank you, Carl. And thank everybody at Reform California. I know how hard those guys work for you and for us, for everybody. So thank you so much. Thanks for everything you do, Carl. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Michael.
Thanks, man. Okay, that's Carl DeMaio with Reform California. Always a pleasure. Like I said, the guy's been so supportive. He just does. I get a phone call from him, I'm going to say a couple times a month. And it's usually, he skips right over, hey, how you doing? And gets right to, here's what we need to do. Here's how it's going to benefit the Second Amendment. Here's how it's going to help San Diego County gun owners. I mean, it's hard to keep up with the guy. And again, never asks for anything in return. And that is very unusual in the political arena. So thank you, Carl, for everything you do. All right, that's our show. Thank you so much, Alicia, and thank you, Dakota, and thank you, Carl DeMaio and Mayor Franklin. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to watch us every week on Sunday from 5 to 7. And then check out our website. Check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/gunownersradio, and get involved. See you next week.